Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Ellis. I'm a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and a Buddhist scholar. And in this podcast, I usually take a deeper look at psychological topics, sometimes spiritual, matters of self development. And I try to show the obstacles and the problems that come inevitably with a simple look at these topics and try to give a more realistic perspective on the difficulties that we encounter when we want to go deeper. Today, I want to go deep indeed with a mapping of the philosophy of Hegel against the Buddhist concept of meditation, and especially Vipassana or insight meditation. Now, in order to take this look, I cannot start completely at the beginning, neither with Hegel nor with Vipassana meditation. So I encourage you to look at articles, YouTube videos, books that give you a proper introduction, both about the idea and the teachings and the practice. In the matter of Hegel, you can consult both Wikipedia and also more thorough treatments online by scholars who are desperately needed in order to get a clearer view, because the philosophy of Hegel is, even though I'm a big fan, but it's more difficult to penetrate. He had his own language, and some of the concepts are also unfamiliar. So it needs good translators in order to get a good idea of them. Now let's start with the Vipassana meditation. Again, I'm simplifying both, so forgive me if it doesn't cover all the details and nuances. Vipassana meditation is called insight meditation because ideally, as a result of this practice, we gain insight both into ourselves, our biography, our life and personality, but also into more unpersonal or transpersonal abstract insights into the mind and the world as a whole, hopefully leading to some sort of liberation, or if you are among the lucky few, then Vipassana is supposed to lead to a full Buddhist liberation as well. Now, how does it look like? Usually we sit on our cushion and we get the instruction to look at the phenomena just as they arise and pass away. And insight meditation usually emphasizes two of the major Buddhist concepts. One is impermanence, and the other one is the so-called not self. The impermanence aspect in insight meditation appears in the extreme short life of the appearances as they occur, which is usually called the arising and falling, the arising and disappearing of experiences, sense impressions, and so on. It can be sensory information, like before the inner eye, something that comes up, a visual stimulus. It can be a sound that we hear. It can be a thought. It can be a short feeling, the awareness of a mood. So anything basically that is in the repertoire of the mind can come up, but the nature of impermanence creates a very short duration in the mind. Now, how does that occur? Because usually, yes, we are quite used to things changing also rapidly in the mind, but this is not what the principle of impermanence in the context of Vipassana meditation is. This extreme short duration of sense impressions in the mind in a successful Vipassana meditation comes from a highly developed skill of non-attachment. What that means is that whenever we perceive something in our mind, be it a memory, a feeling, some thought that we develop, according to the Buddhist practice, whenever they remain more than a few split seconds, let's say anything that is beyond the duration of a 10th second or something like that, is artificially alive in our mind. Artificially means it's not due its own nature that it persists. Due its own nature, all those sense impressions, all those experiences come up very quickly and fall away or fall apart very quickly. What keeps them alive and what gives us in normal life the impression of a continuum where one idea, thought, memory, uh, anything of that sort basically leads to another in a flow of exchanging events in the mind. What lets this arise is an attachment, or to put it in more everyday language, an interest, a motivation, an investment in some sort in this particular content. Something that annoyed me, something that I'm interested in to pursue, something that I want to plan for, something that I want to avoid, anything like that. Joy, displeasure, anything that catches my interest or keeps me obsessed or keeps me invested for whatever psychological reason is an artificial increase of the lifetime, of the duration of a certain content in my mind. So, for example, I went to the city, the bus was at the bus stop, the bus driver saw me, I was running to get the bus. The bus driver still closed the door, drives off. This is something that occupies my mind and it pops up during the day, fuels revenge fantasies, fuels anger, frustration, all those sorts of reflections of memory, my preparation of what I would do next, my thought about should I write a letter, and of course, all those different events in daily life, be it work, be it relationship, family, children, hobbies. Everything is a to-do, everything has an emotional impact, and this, simply put, guarantees my interest, my investment. And this investment is, in Buddhist terms, an expression of my attachment with this topic, with a certain outcome, and that keeps it longer than necessary in the mind. When we practice Vipassana and we become more proficient with that, we see that the duration, especially when it goes well, so to speak, that the duration of those events in the mind becomes shorter and shorter. We catch ourselves entertaining thoughts, being interested, even though we sat on the cushion wanting to switch off, wanting to let go. But this is our unconscious. We are not fully in control of our faculties, our mental faculties. So the unconscious comes in, assumes that we're still interested, rightly so, and keeps the expression in the mind, the experience, the thought alive longer. Okay, but again, Buddhist theory, practice theory, if we're successful in Vipassana meditation, we experience it as a very short duration of the sense impressions in our mind. The second aspect is not self. The non-attachment that I already mentioned directly goes into that concept of not self. From the Buddhist perspective, we are invited by our unconscious tendencies to stay interested, attached, to identify ourselves with certain aspects of our life, but that we are actually not that. It's an illusion, it's a lie that has psychological reasons. But in fact, when we, again, successfully practice Buddhism or Vipassana meditation specifically, then things do appear in our mind, but they are like clouds in the sky. We are unattached. They have their lifetime, their duration. They go away. I don't cling. And so they come and go because I'm not attached, because I see them as not self, both consciously and also unconsciously. They disappear just as quickly as they came. So Vipassana meditation very directly connects to those fundamental Buddhist aspects of impermanence and not self. Now, I talked about what successful Vipassana meditation looks like. if I'm not successful, and most people are not, how does that look like? Any one of you who has the experience of doing meditation on a cushion will be familiar with this. Small exception, if people are used to guided meditations, they more often have the feeling of a success, but this is mostly due to trance effects by being kept basically invested emotionally through the voice that is guiding me. So there is a bias in the experience. But when people practice on their own without a guide, without a voice that keeps them going, then they quickly come to the limitations of their everyday approach to their mind. So they're frustrated quickly with the Vipassana practice. Why? Because they simply are unable to achieve this ideal of being unattached and letting things go quickly. Again and again, I find myself trapped in daydreams and cultivating thoughts and developing them. And only after a while, after sometimes 10 minutes, people wake up kind of and realize that they were not there, that they were gone, that they were absorbed in this thought or fantasy. Another problem is that people have some sort of an emotional journey that keeps them glued to their experience. People can be very tired, and it might not be a succession of ideas, thoughts, fantasies, emotions, and so on, but it feels like a blank, but it's not. It's more heavy, it's lethargic. So it's kind of a dreamless, almost sleep kind of state connected with mental tiredness or physical tiredness. So we encounter all kinds of problems when we sit on a cushion, and it needs diligence, interest, time, motivation, skill, sometimes also intellectual skill to develop the practice of Vipassana meditation. Now, if it works, there are certain effects that come, benefits. So not only the immediate effect of experiencing the impermanence and the non-self, but it comes along with a sense of purification and lightness. The mind becomes pliable, fresh, and light. As I mentioned, insights may occur, insights into who I am and why I act as I act, maybe sometimes regret or wanting to develop to become a better person for the people around me. And sometimes it can be more impersonal insights, for example, into the Buddhist framework, into the Buddhist teaching, into the mind. All of these are direct benefits of the meditation practice, of the Vipassana practice, particularly if we don't do anything of that sort, any way of being meditation or through other tools, purification and emptying, becoming light in the mind, what happens with in our lifetime, with as a direct result of experiencing and living, with the years, the mind becomes heavier. It becomes heavier because it has no, it is acquiring experiences again and again. It is trying to figure out life, which means how to increase pleasure, satisfaction, calmness, how to decrease challenges, problems, emotional problems, pain, mental pain, socioeconomic stress, and so on. The mind is constantly trying to figure these things out. This is directly connected to the programming that we have, that is basically baked into our mind and our consciousness. And because none of the experiences basically goes to waste in our mind, we always imply it in the next contemplation. So if I ended a relationship, for example, I want to make sure that the next relationship is better than the last one. So I am invested, I am encouraged to keep everything in mind that happened in the last relationship so that the next one is better. And this is just a very simple example. This happens, this carrying the luggage, the heaviness of the past experiences, is not only in key moments, not only in life events, but basically happens at every moment again and again and again. So with time, the burden of the experiences, of the learned lessons, becomes heavier and heavier, So we have an archive that we carry around, and that archive that is trying the balancing act again and again becomes heavier, hence the need to become light, switch off, distract ourselves, either in an unhealthy way. Drugs, alcohol is something that many people use on a daily basis to alleviate themselves, or we do it in a more healthy way, in a structured way, starting from simple things like the physical body, with sports, with bodily awareness, and to more advanced things like philosophy, practice, meditation practice, be it Buddhist, be it another advanced practice that we can do. So there is a direct positive effect of a successfully applied meditation practice in our life. Good. So that was my roundup of Vipassana meditation. Let's come to the other part that I want to relate it to, which is the philosophy of the German philosopher Hegel. Hegel died in 1831. So his main work has been done at the beginning of the 19th century. He was a philosopher of many fields, but in our case, most importantly, he was a philosopher of psychology. What is important about him, he built a system of philosophy, he built a system of the mind, which allows us to basically create a map of detailed steps how the mind develops. And so we can position ourselves and our experience within this map. And this is what I want to do today, to relate the Buddhist Vipassana experience to the map of Hegel and to derive some more understanding from that. Hegel's main point was to develop an understanding of the spirit. The spirit for him is the foundational substance, for the lack of a better word, of everything. So the spirit is not only something mental, the spirit underlies also nature. In fact, for Hegel, the spirit is the essence of the world that wants to reveal itself to itself. What does it mean? It means that, for example, before consciousness, when there's just nature, the spirit exists in the form of nature, for example, but it doesn't know itself. And the reason why Hegel thinks there is a tendency in nature to develop life and develop consciousness and higher consciousness is precisely because there is an innate need in the spirit to become aware of itself, so that it goes full circle, so that it can in the end be itself, for itself, but also know itself as itself, so that it becomes a grand fulfillment, basically, of its own nature. This is the idealism there. It's also called monism because it tries to derive all of existence from one principle, which is the principle of the spirit. And this was popular for a relatively short time. Around the time of Hegel, there were some other philosophers before him. Fichte basically started with that approach. A friend of Hegel, Schelling, was another philosopher who developed this way of thinking. What is special about Hegel is the precision and the detail in which he dedicated his philosophy to the development of mind. So this is what attracts me as a philosophical psychologist. And I think that it has been underused both in philosophy, in psychology, in the development of artificial intelligence, and I hope to contribute at least a little bit to make Hegel's ideas more interesting to a contemporary audience. So spirituality, as we understand it, is baked into Hegel's system, and in that sense, it's quite revolutionary at our time, at his time, but also for our times as well. What I want to focus on today is to focus on the first 4 steps of the development of consciousness. Again, the spirit for Hegel is something entirely different. There are many, many more stages in the development of the spirit, but at some point when in nature it starts to develop and then develops life, then we have the four stages in which the mind and consciousness develop. And this is where I want to set in. The first stage in the development of the mind for Hegel is what he calls natural consciousness. The natural consciousness includes the concept of the soul, which I would mainly translate as the unconscious, of course not the unconscious in the Freudian sense, but in the unconscious in the sense that consciousness has not developed yet. Natural consciousness is a stage where all the mental activity is clumped together into a distinctionless, unseparated, undifferentiated mass held together by impressions, emotions, moods. And in this stage, the mind is still overwhelmed with the quality and the fabric of emotions. There is no distinction yet. Everything is a mess. It's like a field where everything exists at the same time. There is no capacity basically to do anything for a subject. There is no distinction yet. What is important here, and also foundational for the understanding of Hegel's spirit, the spirit strives for freedom. One of the essential qualities of the spirit, when it more and more realizes itself, it more and more realizes the principle of freedom. So for Hegel, spirit is intrinsically connected with freedom. And in this stage of natural consciousness where everything is clumped together, there is a very essential non-freedom. What is the non-freedom on the stage? At this stage, the non-freedom is that two phenomena are clumped together. One is the ability to perceive, the ability to sense, the ability to experience, and the experience itself. They are clumped together and there's no distinction between them. So to move a little bit forward, but we're staying in the field of natural consciousness, when I hear a dog bark, what comes together is the ability, my capability of experiencing any kind of sound. This is, if you want to call it this way, this is more me because it is part of my mechanism, the human mechanism, right? It's part of my hardware, the ability to hear, to have sensory perceptions. But then the dog barking is something very specific. The dog barking is not me. This is something outside of me. It's circumstantial. It's random. If it happens or not lies completely outside of my purview. So in a stage where those two are clumped together, compare it to a dream, if you like, which is quite close to the experience of the unconscious. When those are clumped together, this phenomenon is unfree because it doesn't separate between what is me, my capability, and what is outside of me. This experience depends very much still on the circumstances, on random factors. And this leads to the second stage. The second stage is called in German Anschauung. In English, it's sometimes translated as intuition. I don't think this is a good translation. Sometimes it's translated as sensuous perception, which is more fitting. Now here, there is a first distinction between the capability to perceive and the sense impression, the sensory experience. The main characteristic here is that it's a bare awareness, a bare consciousness. There is not yet the experience of the barking of a dog. It's auditory, but there is no recognition of anything yet because at this stage we have no memory. There's just a thing happening. And immediately after it happens, there is nothing that keeps it. There is no memory function. There is no interest yet. All of these later phenomena are complications of the mind and of the human mind, where consciousness is folded upon itself. At this stage of sensuous perception, there is only bare, naked, instantaneous events happening. And here you already, I think you smell the fish there, because this is the direct connection to the Vipassana state that we aim for in Buddhist practice. So what is happening here? What is happening is that a differentiation and a separation takes place. Driven by the spirit's motivation to be free and to experience itself, what is happening is that it retains as itself the capability aspect of the experience. So the ability to perceive is more itself, always in quote, itself. And it throws out the random aspect, the circumstantial aspect, the sound. It throws it out. Where does it throw it out? Into time and space. So for the first time on the stage of bare awareness, we have the possibility to experience time. It is created on this stage and is created specifically for the purpose to separate something that is more me from something that is random and circumstantial. Now, it is not thrown out and then forgotten. It is thrown out and then bound by attention or awareness. So it's something that was clumped together. Now we take apart the experience part, the momentary part, the random aspect of the moment. It is thrown out, but it is bound by almost like a rope. And that rope is attention or awareness. Clearly on this stage, the events are very impermanent. They arise just as quickly as they fall away. And attention is created by the way, so to speak, in order to connect those two formerly clumped together aspects. Like I said, there is no recognition yet. It's just bare awareness. What is important at this stage is that if you remember in natural consciousness, the aspect of feeling and mood was quite strong. It was the glue that kept this clump together. It is still very recognizable. It is still strong here because natural consciousness is the direct neighbor, so to speak, of the stage of sensuous perception. So there is always the possibility to slip back and to fall back into the unconscious mode where feeling takes over. So this is what we keep in mind, some sort of a risk at this stage that we fall back onto emotions. So to sum it up, this stage of sensuous perception, the second stage, is the stage where consciousness properly appears, the consciousness of something, of objects. And those objects have been before on the stage of natural consciousness been clumped together. Now it is thrown out. By the way, and on the fly, attention is created as a rope, as binding the random experience to something that is more fundamentally the subject. Some characteristic of the stage is that whatever happens always is and feels new. And it must be so because the memory function has not been developed yet on the stage. And with this newness and the emotional capability that is in the mind already, the experience on the stage is of awe and wonder. So things happen new in rapid succession. They feel fresh, they feel always new, and there is a sense of wonderment, of awe to this fresh consciousness, which experiences new things all the time in rapid succession. The next stage is called in German Vorstellung. In English, I found the translation of conceptual awareness. And I think this is a pretty good translation because here memory comes in. And memory allows us, and think of children, for example, who develop the faculties with time, allows us to recognize things. And with this recognition comes the ability to form concepts and to retain those concepts. The perception is not fragmented anymore. There is a glue. The glue of the objects that we perceive on this stage of conceptual awareness is the recognition of concepts, or the recognition of objects, or recognition of ideas. This is the glue that keeps them together now. So it's more intellectual, it's more cognitive, and it's less the glue of emotionality as it was in the unconscious and the natural consciousness. So these experiences are fused, and now finally I can hear the dog bark. It's not just audio noise that comes and goes quickly. There is an audio signal that enters my mind, but then what it triggers is the recognition that I have heard that before. I might combine it with a visual impression of a dog that I've seen, or documentaries, or that I've petted, or whatever. So I have developed a concept, or I have the capability of developing complex concepts. I retain those, and then I just need a fragment from the outside to trigger that concept. And it doesn't even have to be a barking dog. I can see food, then I think of dog food, and then the concept of the dog is already triggered. So here, all the complexity of that comes into the mind with the introduction of memory gets established. Obviously, there are many substages here because memory brings a very complex possibility for self-referencing system, but we keep it kind of connected, we keep it simple, and calling it the stage of conceptual awareness. Beyond that, there's one other big stage, which Hegel calls thinking. And here we can interpret it psychologically at the stage where not only concepts are triggered, but conglomerates of concepts, something like a worldview, something like a self-view. So it's not only small, basically chunks, they are connected now in superclusters, so to speak, and they give the subject the possibility to relate to itself and to the world. Now, let's introduce to this. So that was basically Hegel's perspective on the development of the mind. Before that, we have the Vipassana practice. Now, let's bring in the mental health perspective. When we look at where problems can arise in the individual development, it is not on the stage of the natural consciousness. This is where basically the raw data is processed in a field without the ability of distinction. It is also not on the level of sensuous perception, because there we have no memory yet. This is, again, the first experience of raw, bare awareness. It's the first appearance of consciousness. Where problems can come in is when the memory function kicks in. So on the stage of conceptual awareness, this is where people, children, teenagers, adults start to have the possibility of developing in an unhealthy way. When, for example, I am told by my parents not to do certain things, there is the possibility, there's the risk that I develop a concept of danger, that I develop the concept of anxiety, that when I touch something on the table, I might get scolded, looked at angrily, shouted at, yelled, beaten, whatever the spectrum is on which negative consequences occur. Or, of course, also on the positive sides, when I scream as a baby, then nutrition follows. So that is conditioning and conceptualizing that happens, that leads to good things. But again, focusing on mental health, the building stones of concepts where I learn that things are in a certain way and it matches my experience, this is where unhealthy concepts can get into the mind, and from here on basically distort or influence my unconscious from the level of conceptual awareness. And since the concepts come together in those superclusters on the more kind of developed level of thinking, the worldview and self-view, obviously once unhealthy aspects are established on that level, that not only I have separate concepts of unhealthy reactions, but they become more generalized as a view that I'm not good, I'm not healthy, I'm not worthy of love. I have to constantly perform in order to be successful, in order to be worthy, or I have unhealthy thoughts about the world. The world is bad, the world is frightening, people just are out there to take advantage of you, to abuse you, and so on. So then I have developed a conglomerate of concepts on the level of worldview, of self-view, that are unhealthy, and at the latest then we get into the trouble of perpetuating those, because once I have formed a concept, once I have formed chunks of concepts, self-views, worldviews that are unhealthy and problematic, they are somewhat sturdy. What we have to do now, and here we directly apply the Hegelian system and the somewhat cruder Buddhist perspective, is a restart. We have to clean our mind from these views and from the concepts, right? Stage 3 and 4 in the Hegelian system. What we ideally start with is the big picture. I look at my life, I look at the world, and I recognize I don't want to go on like this. I don't want to treat myself like this. I don't like how I think about myself. So here I start to form the motivation to adjust my general view on my life, on myself, on the world. And in practice, here is where I get interested. I look at YouTube videos, I go to I buy a Buddhist book maybe, I see some YouTube lecture. In whatever way I get interested in a vision, I want something new. So I start with the latest stage, at the thinking level. I take a correction on that level. I want to become someone else on that big level. Of course, this is not enough, except for the lucky few. There are a few people who, for whatever reason, this brings in a major shift when they just read a book on Stoicism, on Buddhism, on Hegel, on whatever other spiritual tradition or psychology. It just rings a bell and things go automatically. Usually this is not the case. What we need to do is to break it down to the level of concepts. To give you an example, I'm also a couple therapist, so sometimes when I have couples, they want to learn to communicate differently. What stands in their way is the rigid concepts that they have made of the other, the concept that I have of my girlfriend, or of women in general, or of people in general. And then I go to a psychologist or a counselor, and they teach me, for example, the communication method of nonviolent communication. And here I have a change on a conceptual level, right? It's not worldview, it can be worldview, but it's more defined as this is how you communicate in a way so that the other doesn't perceive you as a threat and is invited to communicate in a gentle way as well. This is basically what nonviolent communication and related communication systems do. And then I want to practice it. And then I come to the very practical level of changing my conceptual awareness, which means my partner enters the room, says something, I am triggered, and because I've learned intellectually nonviolent communication, my challenge is now to stop the automatic process from going on, which means I get upset and yell something because I perceive what she said as a threat. So I use my memory function to stop myself, to induce the new way of thinking and communicating, to put myself in her shoes, to speak with I messages, to distinguish my impression of what she said from what she actually said, and go through the process of nonviolent communication hoping that it has a positive effect. But nonetheless, I intervene on the conceptual level. I intervene at the memory level. This is where I introduce the new. So we started with a big topic. I'm dissatisfied with my relationship, with relationships in general, with myself. I break it down to concepts, and then I work on the implementation of concepts in those specific moments. Sometimes this is not enough. Sometimes people are so overwhelmed by the unconscious automatic responses, or they cannot simply convince themselves to feel differently, even though intellectually they have seen that there are more healthier ways to deal with themselves and the world. And what people need to do then is to go even one step further. They have to go to the next crude, undifferentiated level, which is the level of sensuous perception, bare awareness. And we could do this specifically with the meditation method of Vipassana or insight meditation, because here we have established tools and ways to get to the level where the programming of the concepts is done. Of course, it is also done on the level of the unconscious, but we don't have direct access to the unconscious. We never do. We have representations of the unconscious when we work with dreams, with hypnosis, and so on. We never have a direct access to the unconscious. What we do have is we have direct access to the level of sensuous perception if we are motivated. Because in order to lock ourselves into that level, we have to practice a lot of detachment and non-self already. Because I want to establish myself in bare awareness, to let perceptions come and go, right? This is the practice of Vipassana. What is interfering? What is interfering is my old me. It comes in and directly competes with my experience. It wants to bring in the plans, my emotions, the stories, the problems, the narratives. This is what it wants to bring in because this is me. Now, I, as a distinguished meditator, as someone who has practiced this view, I have learned to perceive those things as random and as not me. So I throw them out. I perceive them, I let them go, and hence the quick succession again of experiences that has, as I said in the beginning, hopefully the beneficial aspects of purification and of lightness. Now, the problem is when people meditate in this way, that they often don't know where they are. They get lost. And here we can use Hegel's map to understand and to lock ourselves in to where we are. The proper stage of Vipassana meditation in order to purify and make ourselves lighter is a not emotional, because the more emotional we get, the more we get under the power of the unconscious, and we slip into daydreaming and to unconscious processes. This is not it. We are precisely at the level where we throw out the random aspects that are not us. And by throwing this out and binding it with attention, we are also limiting the hold of emotions on ourselves. So when you catch yourself practicing Vipassana, becoming or being emotional, then you immediately recognize that you have lost the sweet spot of Vipassana. Second thing, duration. When you see that states of mind, that moods, thoughts, and so on have a longer duration, a lifespan, again, you realize that you're either conceptualizing or emoting. You're falling either on the conceptual level or you're falling into the unconscious processing. So again, we stop that, we recalibrate. Third, when you perceive yourself experiencing in concepts, you hear a sound, but it's a dog barking. If that idea of a dog barking, again, endures too long and doesn't fall apart, you are too much on the conceptual side. Ideally, on the stage of Vipassana, you have bare, not yet conceptualized perceptions. Fourth, we are in a state of experiencing new. So when you think that you watch the breath, but the breath is something very known to you at that moment, you are not at the stage of Vipassana, you're not at the stage of sensuous perception, because again, we have not developed yet at this stage, or we are forgetting the memory function. It has to be fresh. It's a fresh experience all the time, and the freshness comes with awe and wonder. So these are the criteria that help us to locate ourselves in our meditation practice. And I hope that I could show how a mapping of Hegel's philosophical perspective on the development of mind, how we can use that to harvest more precision in our meditation practice, so that hopefully we can harness and harvest those beneficial results from our practice. I will continue to do content on Hegel and Buddhism, Hegel and psychology, because I think that there are many treasures that have not been recovered yet and not utilized yet for our understanding of the mind. So I hope to see you again in the next video. Feel free to leave comments and questions. I totally understand it's a complex topic, so that I can have the opportunity to answer those in a following video. See you soon. Goodbye.